We begin with an update on the shooting in Washington, D.C. this week that's being investigated as an act of terrorism. One National Guard member has now died, while another remains in critical condition. And we'll have further updates on that for you as the show progresses. But first, we turn to Republican political strategist Angie Wong for comment and analysis. Angie, good to have you with us this morning. Thanks for joining us.
Good morning.
Let's begin with how this week's shooting in Washington may change the way that voters see border security heading into the midterms.
Yeah, I think this episode has given the Trump administration all the ammo it needs to double down on its closed border policies. I think this is one of the reasons why many Americans fear domestic terrorism on our own soil, coming after our guards. So I think this episode really characterizes why the Trump administration wants to get rid of people from this country who hates our country. And that is starting to become clearer and clearer with this alleged shooter and his motives. And even Trump last night came out at Mar-a-Lago and said he's going to now be reviewing any application that's coming in from third world countries and permanently closing it down until that review can take place and removing anyone who is not a net asset to the U.S. So I think these are all the, I guess, circumstances that have brought us to this place where now Trump has the political will as well as the public support to now do further closed border policies.
And Attorney General Pam Bondi is pushing for the death penalty in this case. Will that help or hurt Republican messaging on crime?
I almost think you need to do it only because of the circumstances around this political violence. And that's what it's becoming clearer and clearer, that this is another episode of political violence. And America is trapped in this cycle, this endless cycle. Just in the last 18 months, we have seen so many instances of political rhetoric turning into physical violence and killings. And we have so many examples of that. We need to stop that cycle. A lot of it has to be with capital punishment because it may deter future political acts of violence. And I think for me personally, I'm okay with that.
Now, some critics say deploying the National Guard went too far, while others are saying that it was needed. Which side do you think most Americans are on right now?
Well, I'm exploring the idea that this alleged shooter drove from Washington state to Washington, D.C., looking for National Guards to ambush. Now, it wasn't that long ago that we were doing reports that President Trump's administration wanted to have National Guard on the ground in Portland, and it was just really strange to me that that didn't happen. I know in Washington State, that was not, the judge struck that down, but he was looking for that. So I'm wondering if the rhetoric in the news cycle in that northwestern part of the world really kind of fueled a lot of the anxiety for this shooter. We know that a lot of these lone wolf actors, they get radicalized online. And I think it's time to call on Congress and the president to look at American tech companies that do not self-police and kind of weed out people that could be red flagged very early on, especially with the content that they're reviewing. It almost has to come down to the Hill and also our Oval Office to do something about this, to really cut the pipeline of all this radicalization that's happening online.
Yeah, certainly we'll be looking to see if there's more action on that. And of course, the top news is this tragic death of Sarah Beckstrom, just 20 years old. It really pulls on some heartstrings to see her portrait and think about her family. Hopefully Andrew survives the other victim here, but how do you think the loss here and the notice of her death could impact Americans' view of the president's National Guard deployments across the country?
Well, it certainly humanizes the story. And we hear that her father was by her side when she passed, holding her hand. The whole country should be grieving a loss of someone who just wanted to serve her country. And that's all she was doing. She was in uniform, walking down in broad daylight in Washington, D.C., where it was heavily, heavily trafficked, and lots of tourists going into D.C. this week for the holidays. And so it was just so sad to see such a I mean, she was so young, 20 years old, wanting to serve her country and just doing her job, and to be ambushed this way. So I think her story and her family, I think this amplifies why we need to really come down hard on these political violent crimes that are happening almost every single week these days. And it's really sad to see, but I'm glad that, she's not going to die in vain, and that her story may propel real changes in our legislation to protect everybody, including our military and law enforcement, against political violence.
And do you think that this tragedy could actually bring some people across the line who had originally felt opposed to the deployment of these troops across the country?
Well, I think Congressman Mark Alford said it best. I think that we have to be unified. I think it starts with leadership. And I think that, both sides of the aisles, leaderships from both sides should come and condemn any sort of political violence, even if it is targeting their own party. It has to stop. And I think that you're going to start seeing some real legislative changes now. I thought we were going to see it after the Charlie Kirk death, but clearly this has not stopped since. And I think that it's kind of gone over the line to the point where there's no American appetite for it from either side of the aisle. Yeah, no, I do hope that the Congress, when they get back into session, at the very least, tries to do a pledge to stop and tone down this violent messaging that's coming from our own congressional members. That's the sad part. We just saw weeks and weeks of viral videos from the seditious six. We've seen a mobile advertising truck drive around Washington, D.C., questioning whether or not the National Guard should be doing their duties. We see a billboard near Fort Bragg asking soldiers to deflect. All of this is the result of these killings is because I think a lot of the political rhetoric that's been floating around, and it's been confusing for a lot of people, and some people take it too far.
Certainly, we are all hoping that violence really turns around and fast. Thank you so much for your time this morning and your insights, Angie Wong.
Thank you.